I'm sick of hearing everyone call Call of Duty's matchmaking algorithm skill-based matchmaking. After doing tons of research, writing, brainstorming, experiencing the game, and absolutely scrutinizing how Activision addresses the issue, it's abundantly clear that Call of Duty does not use skill-based matchmaking. It uses something far worse. But first, we have to understand why and how we've made it to this terrible situation as players and consumers. Companies have long since advanced from the simple, singular integration of skill into their matchmaking. Long since advanced. Back in games as early as COD 4, as Activision claims, there is a utilization of some kind of skill measurement that assists in filtering lobbies that are suitable for you to play in. At first, it was simply a solution to a broader problem, that as the years pushed on, players were getting better and better at the game, and as a result, mixing lesser skilled casual players with higher skilled competitive players wasn't the best idea for player retention, at least according to the corporations that owned the Call of Duty franchise. Apparently, it was conceived that players would for some reason quit playing a game they liked if they got beaten by somebody that was better than them. So, in order to separate players of drastically different skill levels, skill-based matchmaking was born. It was first widely noticed by the player base in Black Ops 2, although that game is contested to be the best game in the entire franchise. However, the weight that skill had in that matchmaking was unobtrusive, and was genuinely done to try to balance out the player experience so that terrible players weren't getting stomped by players that were insanely good. The intentions behind it were, as far as I can tell, good. But then, Activision realized how profitable multiplayer shooters were, and more specifically Call of Duty, and as a result started enhancing and dialing in their matchmaking and game design practices in order to see if players could become more addicted to the game, and spend more money on the game. The way human nature functions is that if we're not careful, and we get nudged along too much, we can only wake up and realize where we are once we're in too deep. It's happened historically in every major dictatorship to arise, and ironically, it's also happened in something as trivial as a AAA first-person shooter. To understand how the matchmaking in the game has gotten where it is now, we have to understand how Activision was able to nudge us along this path of degrading game quality and increasing greed until there was no turning back. First, it was DLC map packs and camos. Then it ended up as overpriced bundles and the Black Cell Battle Pass. The entire time, certain matchmaking practices were tested, software was patented, different parameters were measured and thrown into the matchmaking like game-to-game performance, whether players won or lost, and other scary factors like predicting what emotions people were feeling, and tracking how quickly players made their inputs on their control scheme to read how interested and engaged in the game they are. This is patented software by Activision, by the way, and it's said not to be abstract but practical and in use. There's an admission that they use it in the patent. What has happened over time is that we as a player base have been nudged little by little across every game to see what works and what doesn't. Has anyone noticed that since Black Ops 2, the quality of life for players has just gotten worse and worse every year? Even the games that were better than the others, like Cold War compared to Modern Warfare 2019 and Black Ops 4 compared to World War II, had underlying flaws in the matchmaking and balancing of the game that were just not okay. First, we got a little nudge forward with loot boxes. People still bought the game and fiended loot boxes for the Bal 27 Obsidian Steed. We didn't want another jetpack COD after Black Ops 3, and people still bought Infinite Warfare despite it being the most disliked COD trailer to date. Black Ops 4 still had loot boxes with overpowered DLC weapons gate-kept behind them, and people bought the loot boxes instead of saying it was unfair. Modern Warfare 2019's weapon progression was specifically designed for player retention. Look at the amount of levels each weapon had in that game. Heck, look how many there still are now. People still bought it for $60 and invested countless hours unlocking every attachment for every gun. The matchmaking is noticeably horrible, but it's not too heavy yet. They make the spawns worse, more unpredictable, and ultimately try to benefit the casual camping playstyle with the worst maps ever conceived in a Call of Duty. I mean, who invented Piccadilly? Plus, this introduced the Fortnite-like in-game store with inconceivably overpriced bundles. Cold War releases and the matchmaking is far too competitive. The weapons take literally forever to level up. The maps are subpar and too large. And the microtransactions are insanely overpriced, and everyone still buys it. Vanguard comes out as an absolute unfinished mess with horrible bugs, terrible map design, and a time to kill that is too fast, just like Modern Warfare 2019. And even worse matchmaking than Cold War, even more expensive microtransactions, and we still buy it. Then Modern Warfare 2 comes out with horrible gunplay, horrible maps, even more overpriced bundles, an overpriced Black Cell Battle Pass, a suffocated skill ceiling due to no minimap dots, no movement options, and slow gameplay overall. It becomes the best-selling COD ever. Back to back, we caught Vanguard and Modern Warfare 2, which are undoubtedly the two worst games in the series. Yes, even worse than Ghosts. Then Modern Warfare 3 comes out. Rumored to be DLC, it is then transformed into a $70 full release, in quotation marks, at the last second, even though it borrows nearly everything from its predecessor, including the engine, weapons, and maps. Overpriced bundles, Black Cell Battle Pass, terrible quality of life, inconsistent gunplay due to funky damage multipliers, overpowered Battle Pass weapons that are paywalled, the worst, sweatiest, most inconsistent, jarring, and abusive matchmaking in any video game out of every Call of Duty. A completely non-existent and dysfunctional anti-cheat that doesn't ban anybody. Then it turns out that the game sells half as well as Modern Warfare 2, but it still sells, and they can say that it has a lot of players because, in case you forgot, Warzone, Modern Warfare 2, and Modern Warfare 3 are all grouped together in the Call of Duty HQ, so they can tell their investors that the game is doing well. So, can you see what is going on here? Every year, Activision has tested what players will buy and what players will not, what players will tolerate while still playing the game. We've gone from the legendary Black Ops 2, with virtually every element appreciated by players, including the matchmaking, to the absolute dumpster fire that is Modern Warfare 3. If these games had no titles in between them, and we just got Modern Warfare 3 2023 right after Black Ops 2, it would have been so jarring of a change that COD would have been easily figured out as a money-making scheme with overly competitive rigged matchmaking, overpriced bundle skins, overpowered DLC weapons, horrible weapon balancing and gunplay, terrible spawns that make no logical sense, and are blatantly rigged with revenge spawns, and the ultimately lazy $70 cash grab price point for something that was obviously intended to be a DLC. If you step back and take a look at how far we've been nudged along, you'll realize that the franchise has moved far away from the glory and quality it once had as a game. Now, it's more about how the company can make money from players and addict them than providing an actually fun multiplayer experience. If you're wondering what their matchmaking has evolved into, then look no further. Stop saying that Call of Duty uses SBMM. It doesn't. Call of Duty uses a form of matchmaking called EOMM, or Engagement Optimized Matchmaking. Invented in 2017 by a group of UCLA students, EOMM is a matchmaking algorithm and methodology that has swept the entire multiplayer gaming industry by storm. You might say, well, Pete, you may be right about the game's quality being bad, but how can we prove that EOMM exists in Call of Duty? When did they transition from skill-based matchmaking to engagement-optimized matchmaking? Good question. The answer is, well, we can't really know for sure. It's not like we can open the source code and look. It's literally impossible. Matchmaking is server-side, meaning it's definitely hard to find 100% proof in coding that it's happening. But just because something can't be directly located doesn't mean that it's not there, or that it doesn't directly and heavily impact the gaming experience. In fact, the only reason people became suspicious that it was there was because the game experience was so jarring and inconsistent. In fact, there are an insane amount of reasons why skill-based matchmaking is a thing of the past, and Activision has adopted EOMM as early as Black Ops 4, but more noticeably in Modern Warfare 2019, where this narrative all started. This study I'll link in the description was done by the people that invented EOMM. There's data and an entire philosophy about it if you want to understand the literature, which I recommend you do. It has charts that explain that inconsistent results breed a higher engagement rate, and that EOMM breeds better player retention than any other form of matchmaking they tested. It's a no-brainer for companies to use this algorithm, regardless of whether or not it's fair or humane. The problem is that it's too dialed in, and its one key weakness is that it fails if the players know it's there, hence me making this video. This study and information was published in 2017. However, Modern Warfare 2019 is when players universally noticed something was wrong. Just like Black Ops 2 with the implications of skill-based matchmaking, this is when players noticed that results seem to be manipulated from game to game. Another main reason we suspect EOMM's first usage in Modern Warfare 2019 is the fact that they started disbanding lobbies after every match, which means that unlike every other game in the series, when you could play with the same lobby of players over and over again with shuffling teams, now everyone in the lobby is forced to be separated, and you have to find an entirely new match. It might seem tame on the outside, but you have to wonder, why on earth would they make this change? That's no coincidence. There is no good explanation for that other than the fact that the matchmaking is tracking your live performance and trying to tailor your match to suit what it deems you need to be more engaged in the game. If it wasn't doing that, it would be completely fine with just leaving you in the same match so you could queue up even faster for another game and play. But because they want to tailor your experience and get you more engaged, they'll separate you from the match you just played and throw you another match that has the intended results. Another way we know is that this is when ping also started to get really wonky as well. Instead of the typical 10 to 40 ping we find on Ethernet, and maybe even lower if you're closer to the server, we see anywhere from 50 to 150 on average. This indicates that Activision are willing to sacrifice our connection and quality of life in order to find the match that the algorithm deems is the most engaging for us. The only reason that we're getting ping like this and lobbies are disbanding now is because they're actively seeking out the most engaging match and not even letting connection get in the way all that much. This is not skill-based matchmaking. This is a clear indication of engagement-optimized matchmaking. And this is only Modern Warfare 2019. It got so much worse every following year, getting dialed up and more advanced with every next iteration of the game. Cold War was the sweatiest nightmare I had played up until that point, and Vanguard was no different. Modern Warfare 2 was horribly inconsistent, and Modern Warfare 3, well, you know the drill with that game. Alright, so your next question is, why don't huge YouTubers like Exclusive Ace, Drifter, Swag, and so forth, or huge streamers, acknowledge that EOMM exists within Call of Duty, or at least question it, and that the matchmaking has gone far beyond just skill-based matchmaking? It sure is obvious that matchmaking has long since evolved past just being purely skill-based, and it's designed to sell microtransactions and addict players. Well, big creators like this have to watch very carefully what they say. For starters, if a creator that is partnered with and making money from Activision, and they deface the integrity of the game by talking about how the matchmaking is rigged, then they could be in for a world of hurt, like a defamation lawsuit or being sued because they breached their contract. But what about creators that aren't partnered with Activision? Well, if they're big enough and they are making a living off playing and talking about the game, they'll never want to admit that they're aware that the game is rigged and using a shady form of highly advanced matchmaking. They call it skill-based matchmaking and act like skill is just being weighed too heavily and that's the only problem. Let me just lay it out. If skill was the only factor, then there would be no need for disbanding lobbies. The evidence is right there. It's either that or they're just not bothering to even look into it. If we ignore the fact that Call of Duty's matchmaking algorithm has gotten much worse and much more manipulative and don't say anything about it, it's not going anywhere. We need to speak up about EOMM so that they know that we know, so that the big creators are finally forced to speak about it. We have to spread the word that EOMM is rigging your gaming experience. Let's not also forget that a lot of big name streamers, who I won't name, are cheaters. Watch any of them being spectated with wall hacks and you'll be amazed. A high percentage of professional streamers are using some form of cheats. Additionally, it's estimated that a whopping 60% of top 250 ranked players are also using some form of cheats, and ranked mode is infested with cheaters, especially in the higher ranks. Also, ranked uses hidden MMR, which completely invalidates the integrity of a ranked mode anyways. That's also something else for player retention that they just managed to sneak by us. Further, Activision released their matchmaking intel blog post explaining, to the best of their ability, why their matchmaking was the best possible tried and true method for the entire player base, and why we should bow down and worship their genius and philanthropy. Let me just lay this out. The fact that they even had to talk about their matchmaking like this lets us know that there is a serious problem. The fact that they literally dance around every single talking point shows us that they have something to hide. This section here shows them addressing the community calling their matchmaking skill-based matchmaking, and then they proceed to not confirm nor deny it, which means it's not SBMM. Otherwise, like every other company that uses it, it would be extremely easy to admit it. Additionally, there are tons of other community questions they attempt to answer, but they dodge the question with a cleverly phrased answer written by a lawyer that sneakily paints a false picture while fooling the average reader into thinking they're telling the truth. For example, this question here: does COD have manipulated damage, hit reg, and spawns, etc.? No, Call of Duty's matchmaking process does not manipulate in-game elements. I mean, please, if anything did that, it wouldn't even be the matchmaking. It would be server-side and not coded directly into the game. Anyone with common sense can see how this answer does not completely address the question. They should be able to say, no, there's nothing in the game that does that. But instead, they just answer one specific facet that doesn't even answer the question. The whole point is that them writing the article shows that there's something blatantly wrong with the player experience that shouldn't be happening. And the way they dodge every question, including throwing this question with the word engagement, which they intend to throw us off the scent of engagement optimized matchmaking, and then proceeding to redefine the word to not even mean what it means in a matchmaking context. If nothing before was proof enough, the fact that they deliberately try to doublespeak in every part of this article and give a half-truth answer when addressing player engagement within the article shows they want to throw us off the scent because they know we're catching on. If you read through the article with a suspicious lens, you'll understand what I mean. mean. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not coping. It's just logic. You don't need a law degree to figure out when somebody is trying to dance around the truth. Protecting bad players was just the humble beginning for this kind of matchmaking. Though good and bad players are still separated and there is obviously a protected bracket, this algorithm is created to force results on you and precisely tailor your matches so that they're the most likely to keep you playing the game for longer at a time. Calling this kind of system, which is patented by Activision, skill-based matchmaking, is just naive, foolish, and ignorant of the true problem. It's not skill-based matchmaking. It's engagement-optimized matchmaking. I understand that is the community's name for it, but we have to change it so that people do their own research and know what is really going on. Everything in COD, from the matchmaking to the extremely long and dragged-out weapon progression, the lack of a decent prestige mode, everything else is about maximizing player retention through a vicious, money-hungry live service model. Activision will do anything and everything to get money from the players, even if that means degrading our quality of life, like good paying, fair matches, and making us spend too much money on simple cosmetic items. And of course, using manipulative matchmaking to force certain results to keep us engaged. So please, stop calling COD's matchmaking skill-based matchmaking. It's not. It's EOMM, engagement-optimized matchmaking. Spread the word, spread the name, and let's get this system changed. Too many games are rumored to use it, and I'm going to cover it. I'm Prime Pete. Take it easy.